Never underestimate the quiet guy, right? Evelyn fired me right there in the hallway in front of everyone. All over a single piece of paper I had quietly picked up off the ground. No questions asked, no deeper investigation. Just one icy glare and a sentence that slammed shut like a deadbolt, locking me out. Pack your things and go. I didn't argue with her, I didn't beg. I just pulled off my work gloves, carefully folded them with the kind of quiet precision that made the moment so hard to watch, and walked away in total silence. But exactly 5 minutes after I stepped into that elevator. 5 minutes and that boardroom door flew wide open. Evelyn stumbled out, all the color completely drained from her face. A $47 million contract was collapsing in real time, and the only guy who could save it had just been sent packing. Stick with me here. What she didn't know yet was who I really was, or what I'd chosen to leave behind. The 14th floor of Meridian. Group's Chicago headquarters felt like a totally different planet at 6:15 a.m. No ringing phones, no voices, just the low hum of AC and my cartwheels rolling over polished concrete. I, Elijah Monroe, pushed my cleaning cart past that row of glass-walled luxury offices. Working the way I always did, highly methodically, without rushing, without making a sound. I learned long ago that being completely invisible gives you a kind of freedom. Nobody ever watches the guy holding the mop. Nobody asks me questions. That setup suited me perfectly. I was 34, broad-shouldered, with calloused hands and eyes that processed far more than I let on. I'd been working the early shift at Meridian for just over a year, 6 a.m. until 2 p.m., 5 days a week. By 2:30, I was standing at the school gate waiting for Isaac. That routine was the entire architecture of my life. And I built it exactly that way on purpose, not from a lack of ambition, as you'll see, but from something way harder to explain to people who hadn't earned that kind of understanding. My son Isaac was 7, and he honestly thought I hung the moon. He had my stubborn jawline, and his mother's habit of laughing at things that definitely weren't meant to be funny. Every morning before I left, the boy was still sound asleep at the neighbor's apartment, tucked safely under a blanket at Margaret's place, 2 doors down. A ragged stuffed dog named Wren tightly pressed under his arm. That dog was missing a button eye and was stitched up twice with black thread, but Isaac completely refused any replacement. Some things he once explained to me with complete deadpan seriousness, you simply kept. I just quietly agreed without adding another word to that. Margaret had 3 grandchildren of her own, but she always treated Isaac like her 4th. I paid her whatever I could. She accepted it without ever making me feel small. I was grateful for that way, more than I ever said out loud. Actually, I was grateful for a lot of things I never said out loud. Down the hall, the design team's workspace was totally littered with the fire. Organized, stressful chaos of people who had been working completely around the clock. Meridian Group was entering the final stretch of their biggest commercial project in a decade. The Halo account, a massive brand identity overhaul for Vantage Industries. A logistic conglomerate operating across 11 states, it was worth $47 million over a 4-year engagement. The final presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. the following afternoon, just 32 hours away. Carter Wade had been running the creative department for 12 solid years. He was 41, very polished, the kind of guy who wore his confidence just like a well-tailored jacket. I watched the board name Evelyn Nash CEO 18 months ago. They completely bypassed Carter. I noticed something dark click behind his eyes that day. He never forgave her, but he never let the mask slip, not in public. Carter was way too slick for that. Meanwhile, Evelyn always walked in right at 7:30. 32 years old, every single move she made was calculated. She knew half the directors still wanted her out of that office. Black coffee in one hand, tablet in the other, she walked like she had crushed 3 massive problems before stepping off the elevator. She clearly hadn't slept much. Carter spent last night whispering about a security breach, claimed someone leaked the Halo blueprints, but kept it vague. I could tell she'd been stressing over it for hours, finding 0 answers. Instead of the elevator, she took the stairs that morning, burning off nerves. She shoved open the 14th floor door and froze in her tracks. There I was, standing right beside the design department's main workspace, right by the drafting tables where the Halo project architects spent all night. I had a piece of paper in both hands, my rubber cleaning gloves turned up to protect it. I was just reading it. I watched Evelyn's brain connect the dots instantly. Carter's warning, the leak. A janitor with full access to the building after hours. Standing over their most classified architecture blueprints, studying every single line. She marched over in 12 quick steps. "What are you doing with that?" I looked up, didn't flinch. I kept my voice calm. It fell off the table. The air conditioning kicked on and it went to the floor. I picked it up. "Did you look at it?" I stared right back at her. I had absolutely nothing to feel guilty about. I didn't try to play dumb, either. I just gave her the quiet truth of a guy who had zero to hide, zero to prove. Yes, I looked at it to see if it was something important before I put it back. That split second of hesitation, just giving her a raw answer, doomed me. Because right then, Carter Wade strolled off the elevator, briefcase tight in his grip. He took in the whole scene with the smug calm of someone expecting exactly this. He strolled over, looked down at the paper. Faked this absolutely perfect, deeply concerned frown for the boss. "Evelyn," Carter muttered, his tone slow and heavy. "That's the Halo Master concept, the typography architecture. That page has never been printed outside the core team. It shouldn't exist anywhere near this area of the floor." He didn't outright accuse me. He didn't have to. He just hung those toxic words in the air. Evelyn stared at the paper, then at me, then the paper again. By then, the morning staff had started trickling in. The whole hallway was filling up. We had an audience now, and if there was one thing Evelyn Nash never did, it was hesitate publicly. Pausing meant showing weakness. And with a hostile board watching her, weakness wasn't an option. Not 24 hours before the biggest project pitch in the firm's history. "I don't know if you picked it up or took it," she finally said. Her tone wasn't mean, just cold, final, and absolute. I heard her voice echo, "I cannot have any risk inside this building right now. Pack your things and leave." I watched Elijah simply look at her. His stare lasted maybe 2 seconds, no anger in his eyes, absolutely zero pleading. You and I have seen that look before, a man who learned long ago that the corporate world runs on its own twisted logic, a logic that rarely cares about the actual truth. He knew exactly what she saw. He completely understood why she made this brutal executive call. He didn't agree with the firing, but it definitely didn't shock him. Slowly, he peeled off his work gloves. He folded them with slow, careful precision, setting them right on top of his cleaning cart. "Understood," he muttered quietly. Not another word. I watched him grab his personal items from the supply room, a water bottle, a tiny notebook with a little picture of Isaac tucked right inside the cover. Tying his jacket around his waist, he headed silently down the hallway toward the elevators. Around us, everyone stared at their phones, their shoes, or just thin air, total silence. Grace, the senior assistant who basically ran this floor for 6 years, stood frozen by the copy machine, just watching him leave. Her mouth actually dropped. But Evelyn's icy glare from 30 feet away killed the conversation before it sparked. The elevator chimed. Elijah stepped right in. Right before the metal doors shut, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He checked it. A quick text message from Margaret. "Isaac wants to know if you'll be home early today. He really wants to practice reading with you tonight." Elijah stared at the glowing screen. He quietly put the device away as the doors sealed shut. The digital floor indicator started ticking down. Evelyn just watched those numbers fall. Then she spun right back toward the main conference room. We had actual work to finish. She shoved any lingering guilt down deep, saving it for another day. Carter practically jogged beside her, already blabbering about new backup contingency timelines. Stick with me, she only had 5 minutes of certainty left. 7 of us crowded into that boardroom. Evelyn, Carter, our digital lead Logan Pierce, and 4 stressed Halo design members. The massive wall monitor glowed with the main project dashboard. Carter was bragging through his final prep walkthrough when Logan opened the primary server folder and completely froze. That heavy dead silence stretched 3 whole seconds before anyone noticed. "Logan," Evelyn snapped, demanding a fast answer. Logan's face went completely blank, like his brain was flat out, rejecting whatever horrifying thing he was staring at. He slowly spun his laptop around so the whole room could see. The primary Halo Master folder was open. The typography system, the absolute backbone of our visual identity that every single brand deliverable relied on, was just gone. Not glitched, not misplaced, entirely gone. The secure cloud backup we trusted, that was fully wiped too. Logan pulled up the main server log. I could see his hands visibly shaking. The massive deletion was triggered at 3:47 that morning. He nervously read the login credentials out loud. He repeated the name a second time because the first pass just felt like an impossible mistake. The login account belonged to Carter Wade. Carter fired back immediately, far too smoothly. You and I both know a rehearsed lie never sounds quite like the truth. He claimed his account was hacked, a targeted corporate cyber attack from a rival. He'd been supposedly suspicious for weeks. He swore he meant to report it, but didn't want to spark panic before the big presentation. His fake voice carried absolute conviction. You and I know if Evelyn only listened to the surface, she might have bought it. But I watched his hands too. Carter's hands were completely, unnaturally still. The hands of a guy with zero fear, because this chaos was exactly what he wanted. The room panicked over the backup problem. Logan pulled a local offline file from last week. He clicked it open and I knew immediately it was completely useless. 60% of the final updates were gone. The version gap was just massive. Showing that garbage to Vantage Industries would be far worse than showing absolutely nothing. Because at least nothing could be easily explained away. An incomplete, outdated presentation screamed that Meridian Group had absolutely no clue what they were doing. The entire room fell into a very specific kind of silent panic. The heavy silence when experts realize no normal solution is going to save them. I had been standing quietly near the door all along. I always listen more than I speak, but you and I both know that when the quiet ones talk, it matters. I spoke carefully, keeping my eyes on the table instead of looking at Evelyn. The janitor you just fired, Elijah, I began. 3 weeks ago, he was cleaning the server room. Logan was complaining about a font system glitch his IT team had been battling for days. Elijah studied the screen for maybe 20 minutes, and he completely fixed it. Logan whispered it to me later. I think the exact word he used was unsettled. Evelyn stared right at me, unsettled by how fast it happened. And by how clearly Elijah understood what he was looking at, I replied. Logan said it was like watching a master read a language the rest of them were barely learning. The room went dead silent. Evelyn slowly sank back into her chair. Right there on the conference table in front of her was the empty spot where the crucial Halo project sheet had been sitting, right before she shoved it aside. The exact paper that had slipped off the drafting desk earlier. The blueprint a quiet janitor in work gloves had simply picked up from the floor and placed back down. He didn't study it to steal or leak secrets. He just needed to know if it required careful handling. And she had fired him for it. She bolted upright and grabbed her smartphone. Her call went to voicemail. She frantically dialed a second time. The line went dead immediately. He had intentionally declined her call. Evelyn dropped the phone onto the table and locked eyes with me. I was already at my keyboard pulling up our company HR database. Elijah Monroe's file was awfully thin, a temporary contract janitor, no permanent status, barely any paperwork. Under education, it just said unspecified college. His home address pointed to the gritty west side. An area that wasn't rich, wasn't broke, just a quietly invisible working-class neighborhood. The exact kind of place where people handle their business without making a scene. I switched over to a professional network search. His real profile popped up instantly, though he hadn't updated it in 4 years, and there was no photograph. His employment history was brief but heavy. Senior visual identity designer at Aldrich and Crane Brand Studio out in New York. From 2014 to 2019, Aldrich and Crane wasn't a name you had to explain. Stick with me here. Every designer in that room knew they were the most respected branding studio on the East Coast. The kind of agency where your career actually meant something. I slowly scrolled down to his next line. Principal designer and founder, Monroe Design Lab, from 2019 to 2020. Evelyn sat there, completely frozen. I quietly searched his firm's name. An old 2020 architecture design article popped up first. You and I know to watch the quiet ones. The headline was brutal and brief. Monroe Design Lab shuts down after founder's tragedy. She read it aloud. She didn't read every word. Most of it just didn't matter right now. The part that hit hardest was this. In September 2020, the quiet genius lost his wife Diana in a fatal car crash. She was 4 months along with their second baby. After that, the silent architect closed his famous studio, sold everything, and moved right back home to Chicago. His little boy Isaac was only 3 back then. At the bottom sat a single quote, the only words the quietest man in the room had shared. It read, "I need steady work, predictable shifts I can plan my life around, and enough time every evening to be the exact father my boy needs." Dead silence hit the boardroom. Nobody dared to speak. Logan just stared at the wall. Grace folded her hands on the luxury desk, staring blankly into empty space. The room held that heavy, crushing weight that hits when powerful people realize they wrongly fired the invisible janitor sweeping their floors. Evelyn checked his file, a cheap walk-up apartment over on the west side. This unassuming man once ran a massive New York studio with his own name on the door, who spent 5 years quietly dominating one of the most elite agencies on the East Coast, building a flawless reputation over 10 incredibly hard years, only to return to Chicago as a janitor, just for the steady, predictable schedule, and the freedom to pick up his son from school every single afternoon. He never bragged, left his elite degree and resumed entirely off the human resources paperwork. He never asked for a single special favor. The quietest man just showed up at 6 in the morning, cleaned the luxury building, and went home. Carter stared at the table, his face completely blank. But he didn't look like a guy who was actually surprised. Stick with me here, Carter already knew. It clicked with everything else from that morning. Carter knew exactly who the janitor was. And he timed his exit off that elevator perfectly to catch the quiet man. That blueprint hadn't fallen off the table by pure accident. It was planted right on the edge of a desk, sitting directly under the air vent in the exact spot the silent genius mopped every Tuesday and Thursday, right before the biggest luxury project presentation in the company's entire history. Carter weaponized an invisible man's daily routine to set a trap, and Evelyn blindly triggered it for him. She finally stood up. She ordered Grace to have security throw Carter out of the building. No drama at all, just the cold, flat tone of an everyday business decision. Carter stood up slowly. We've all seen guys like this, arrogant, holding a backup plan. Waiting at the elevator, he shot her a dark look from down the hall. He warned her this wasn't over. She agreed but said tonight it definitely was. The doors shut, he was gone. She grabbed her phone and keys. The west side address led to a squat brick apartment. Giant old trees pushed right through the cracked sidewalk. A noisy laundromat on one corner, a bodega on the other. Kids' bikes locked to the rusty stairwell railing. You and I know the rule. Evelyn arrived just past noon, Grace riding shotgun. Both walked up the path in that heavy silence, the kind you feel when trespassing on the quiet guy's turf. She spotted the two of them before even knocking. Elijah and his boy Isaac just sitting on the front steps. The kid had a thick chapter book resting on his knees, tracing sentences with one tiny finger, the way kids do when they're just getting to know how reading works. Elijah sat beside him, forearms resting on his knees, gripping a warm coffee mug, watching the street with that heavy, quiet stillness of a man finally taking a breath. He wasn't shocked to see the CEO. Honestly, he didn't look like a guy who got surprised by anything anymore. Little Isaac noticed first. He stared at Evelyn with that blunt, fearless curiosity only 7-year-olds have. "Dad," he mumbled, "someone's here for you." Elijah slowly glanced over. He calmly scanned Evelyn, looked at Grace, then locked back onto Evelyn. The quiet guy waited. "Elijah," she tried, "you can skip the setup." He interrupted softly. His tone wasn't mean at all, just deadly accurate. "You need me to save the project, I totally get it." "That makes perfect sense. Just tell me straight." Evelyn froze right there. Over 18 months running the company, she'd faced down ruthless boards and angry clients, big money investors, and even a director who launched a heavy binder across a tense budget meeting. Yet none of them shook her confidence like this quiet janitor did, simply by demanding the plain truth. "You're right," she admitted softly. "That's true. But it's definitely not the whole story." She hesitated. When she finally spoke again, that slick corporate armor had completely vanished. "I acted way too fast this morning, without real facts, denying you any fair chance to explain your side. I need you to know that I own that mistake." Little Isaac paused his reading. He stared at them with the quiet focus of a smart kid who knows grown-up talk actually matters sometimes. Elijah quietly looked down at his young son. Setting his mug on the concrete, he muttered, Give me a couple minutes. He stepped inside, tapped on Margaret's door, and emerged 2 minutes later shrugging into a worn jacket. They both sat down right there on the concrete steps. Evelyn and quiet Elijah. Listen to this. The negotiation that followed was the most brutally honest chat Evelyn had experienced in years. He plainly asked what she required. She needed the entire Halo visual design fully rebuilt from scratch, perfectly ready for a major luxury client by 2 p.m. tomorrow. She offered 10 times his regular monthly pay, plus a massive performance bonus slapped on top. He quietly replied he didn't need that kind of cash. She waited. He laid out 3 simple rules. First, his boy came along. Isaac needed a totally silent room, strong internet, and a safe place to sleep if things ran late. Elijah absolutely refused to leave his kid alone overnight. That wasn't some polite request, it was a hard rule. Second, that manager Carter Wade wasn't allowed anywhere near the silent guy's workspace. He didn't care about getting any formal apology on paper. He just flat out demanded it. Third, and you and I know he earned this, the Vantage Industries creative contract would officially carry his name. Elijah Monroe, lead designer. His name out front, not buried in company credits. Visible. Evelyn listened to his first 2 conditions and just nodded, zero hesitation. But that third condition, that hit differently. She studied him closely. You see, he wasn't just some guy throwing around loud, angry demands. This was the quietest guy in the room, calmly taking back the talent he'd hidden away for 4 years. Done, she told him. Then she asked why Carter specifically had to be cut out. Elijah's response was soft but sharp. Because that paper didn't fall off the table on its own. Heavy silence. Outside, the city just kept humming through the afternoon. A delivery truck rumbled by. Someone yelled up to a second-floor window. Evelyn stared at the pavement, then met his eyes. She bought every single word. She didn't know exactly when the power dynamic flipped, but it absolutely had. By 6:30, they were back at the tower. Up on the 14th floor, Isaac sat right across from his dad's desk. He'd swapped his book for a tablet, legs dangling from a big office chair, headphones clamped on. By 7, the kid was totally locked into some deep-sea fish documentary that Grace had put on for him. Come 8 o'clock, he was out cold on that little corner couch, tucked under Elijah's jacket, hugging his toy dog. Grace had actually grabbed the plushie from Margaret's place. Meanwhile, Elijah got to work. Logan thought he'd be helping. Within 20 minutes, he was just standing back, watching. It wasn't because Elijah ignored him. The man answered every single question calmly, zero ego involved. But this quiet genius moved with such fierce speed, teamwork just wasn't necessary. Listen, it was like watching a guy walk through a room he'd built blindfolded. Logan had 8 years in the industry, he knew his stuff. Seeing Elijah in the zone was a whole other level. It's the gap between a guy who just learned a skill and a man who literally thinks in blueprints. Elijah didn't even bother restoring the files that got trashed. Fixing the mess would have wasted time. Plus, the final product would be sloppy. You and I know true experts start fresh. He grabbed the raw brief, the early notes, the first mood board. He ripped away absolutely everything. All the pointless fluff piled on top of the real problem. He went back to basics. What was the core message Vantage Industries needed, and what visual layout said it best? They don't want complicated, he muttered, not talking to Logan, just thinking out loud. They want trustworthy. Those are totally different vibes, and someone mixed them up. Logan glanced down at the project brief after hearing that. And suddenly he saw it. The layout had slowly morphed into a cluttered mess, just because people mistake busy for sophisticated. And fancy always wins over the boardroom. Elijah was silently unraveling the garbage to find the gold. By 10, the fresh wireframe was breathing. By midnight, the foundation was rock solid. After that, just pure, quiet polish and spacing. You and I know what separates decent work from absolute excellence. Elijah kept a calm rhythm that completely ignored any sense of panic. He wasn't rushing anything. He stayed completely grounded in his task, proving that moving fast wasn't necessary here. Near 11 p.m., Isaac shifted on the couch. He sat up wearing that hazy, lost look of a kid waking up in a strange new place. Before the child even processed the dark room, his dad was right beside him. Elijah perched on the couch edge, whispering in a low, gentle voice. Isaac leaned heavy against his dad's arm, blinking sleepily. The quiet father stayed put until the boy fell asleep again. Then he went back to work. Across the hall, Evelyn watched him through the glass. The CEO had claimed a backup office over there. She still hadn't gone home. She claimed she stayed in case an emergency popped up with the building design project. But she knew that was basically a lie. Later on, her assistant Grace brought coffees and sat opposite her. Together, they stared through the window, watching the quiet man fix their mistakes near his sleeping son on the couch. Eventually, Grace admitted she had tried to warn Evelyn about the fatal flaw that morning. Evelyn nodded. Grace mumbled that she really should have pushed harder. The CEO flatly replied that the blame belonged to her. Then she murmured it aloud again. It was her own fault. Here's where things get interesting. At 11:30, she permanently suspended Carter's corporate email accounts. He had a draft saved for the Vantage client. Fully typed out, just unsent. It was a message meant to wreck the company's image and stall the big presentation, caught during a late-night tech audit. That tech log was enough. Evelyn launched an HR probe and had security toss him out before the hour was up. No screaming matches, just quiet justice. Carter grabbed his jacket and bag. At the elevator doors, he paused to shoot a hard glare back at Evelyn. She stood frozen at the far end of the hallway. He warned her this wasn't over. She just replied, "Tonight it is." The doors dinged. He stepped inside. The corporate floor grew quiet again. By 2 a.m., the underestimated janitor had finished the job. By 3, after double-checking his work, Elijah packed his bags and scooped up Isaac. The kid stirred, locked his little arms around his dad's neck, and instantly passed out again. They headed out. Grace had a private car waiting outside. Evelyn stood by the glass, tracking the red taillights fading into the dark night. The next day, Vantage Industries showed up at 1:55. Adrian Walsh led their team, a sharp veteran VP of branding in his mid-50s. This guy had sat through thousands of corporate pitches. He could spot fakes in 10 seconds. He shook everyone's hands quickly, moving around the boardroom table with the bored, polite speed of a typical business Tuesday. He gave Elijah a quick, totally blank once-over. No tie, fresh shirt, calm eyes. He stared at Evelyn. "You and I know exactly what his face asked, seeing the quiet guy in that room." Evelyn skipped the small talk. "This is Elijah Monroe." I remember her exact words. "He designed the Halo system, nothing else." No fancy corporate titles, no defensive fluff. The quietest guy stood up. He spoke exactly how he worked, no hesitation, zero theatrical performance. Every design choice was explained by the exact problem it fixed. He didn't hide behind flashy design theory. He broke down Vantage's core value, not their products but their ironclad guarantee. Then he calmly walked us all through the visual logic. It proved that guarantee instantly, without making anyone guess the meaning. Every single element had a purpose. The reasons were crystal clear. The branding system held up everywhere. Business cards, massive billboards, even a complex digital interface. It was bulletproof. When he finished, Adrian Walsh sat in dead silence for 8 seconds. Those of us who knew Walsh understood that heavy pause. He wasn't unhappy at all. It was the stunned stillness of a guy whose brain was racing, just to process what he'd finally seen and heard. The folks in the room who didn't know him started fidgeting nervously. Finally, Walsh spoke. "I have sat through a great deal of brand presentations. This is the first time in recent memory that I finished one without finding a single thing I felt compelled to push back on." He turned his gaze to Evelyn. "Who did you say this was?" "Elijah Monroe," she replied quietly. Walsh stared at Elijah again. A subtle shift crossed his face. It was pure respect. One elite professional realizing the quiet guy in the room was operating on an entirely different level. "I'd like Mr. Monroe's name on the contract documentation," he said, "as designer of record." Evelyn didn't even glance at Elijah when she gave her answer. She just kept looking at Walsh, wearing a slight smile. "That was already part of our terms," she told him. "You and I both know how rare this is." They signed the contract before even leaving. Out in the hallway later, Elijah checked his phone. A text from his kid, Isaac, sent from Margaret's tablet. "Dad, are you done yet? I'm hungry." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not a show, just a genuine, quiet reaction, the kind you only see when someone finally drops their guard for a split second. Evelyn stepped out into the hall. "Mr. Monroe," she started. "Elijah," he corrected. She adjusted. "Elijah." She looked him dead in the eye. "I want to say something that isn't about the company or the contract." He waited quietly. "I looked at you yesterday morning and judged exactly who you were before asking a single question. I knew better than to underestimate someone like that. I did it anyway." She paused. "I'm sorry, not on behalf of Meridian, on my own behalf." Elijah held her gaze. That quiet space between them wasn't awkward. It was the heavy, calm silence of two people being completely honest with each other. "I accept that," he said softly. "That was it. No strings attached, no grand fake forgiveness. Just the quiet closure of a guy who didn't need to turn someone else's mistake into a dramatic, drawn-out story." 2 days later, a formal job offer arrived. Evelyn wrote it herself, which Grace noted was incredibly rare. The role, creative director at large, a massive project-based engagement. No daily grind, total schedule freedom. See why you never underestimate the quiet ones. The new pay matched exactly what Loud Carter made. Every luxury Meridian project born from this deal would carry the quiet janitor's name on it, no exceptions. A freshly typed cover note sat right on top. Not your typical stiff HR corporate paperwork. It simply confirmed no standard employment terms were changed. The only thing we added was that final childcare flexibility clause. That was our idea, not yours, because we honestly should have thought of it first. Elijah read through the offer silently at his kitchen table. Little Isaac sat doing reading homework right across from him, tracing a tiny finger under each sentence, his lips moving. When Isaac finished the page, he spotted his quiet dad staring intensely at some papers. "Is that about a job?" "It might be," Elijah murmured. "Do you like it?" Elijah actually paused to consider that. Not a stalling pause meant to dodge the question, but the quiet, honest kind searching for a real answer. "I think I might." Isaac weighed this with total seriousness. "Will you be home on time?" "Yes, every day. Most days, and if not, you'll know well ahead of time." Isaac silently weighed this answer against some strict internal standard. He finally nodded, returning to his book. Elijah signed the massive contract the very next morning. The HR investigation quietly concluded 3 weeks later. The brutal digital evidence against Carter, those file deletion timestamps, the hidden draft emails and server logs fully justified a harsh, immediate termination. No massive dramatic hearing, no screaming match in a glass boardroom. Just a blunt letter plus a very short meeting with HR. And then, like most loud guys who assume they're untouchable, Carter found out the hard way. He was fired. The whole floor felt different afterward. You and I know that feeling. Like when a toxic machine generating unseen pressure finally gets shut off. That first morning, Elijah stepped back onto the 14th floor as a highly valued senior design member. He walked quietly through the main glass entrance of the Meridian building at 8:45. He slung a worn backpack over one shoulder. Isaac walked beside him with the sharp alertness of a 7-year-old exploring somewhere new, head swiveling, bright eyes tracking, taking total inventory. School was on holiday, and Margaret had a family thing. The quiet dad casually mentioned this to Grace 2 days prior. Grace instantly made a spare office available without being asked. Up at the front desk, the receptionist smiled with that crisp pleasantness of someone double-checking a guest list. "Can I get your name, please?" "Elijah Monroe," he whispered. She checked her screen, her expression shifting instantly. You know that look when a quiet name pops up carrying massive weight? "Of course, Mr. Monroe. Elevator 3 to the 14th. They are expecting you." He gently guided Isaac toward the elevator, resting one hand lightly on the back of his son's shoulders. Isaac stepped inside, immediately staring up at the glowing floor numbers above them, watching with that intense, wide-eyed focus that clever mechanisms always sparked in him. Up on the 14th floor, the doors parted. The CEO, Evelyn, stood way down the hallway near the senior executive wing. Tablet in hand, she was speaking in hushed tones with a project manager. She glanced up the second that elevator opened. She locked eyes with quiet Elijah. "You and I know never to underestimate the quietest person." I watched the CEO stare at Isaac. The kid stepped off the elevator, scanning our hallway like a serious architectural inspector. Then she looked back. She faced the project manager again, wrapping up whatever corporate sentence she was halfway through. After that, she marched right toward her private interior office. But right before she passed the glass partition, her expression suddenly cracked. It wasn't her polished CEO look. It was that raw, quiet panic people only show when they think nobody else in the room is watching them. She vanished through her door before the panic fully landed. Back in the hall, Isaac tugged on his dad's sleeve. "Dad," the boy asked out loud, no whisper at all, "why is your desk bigger than everyone else's?" I watched Elijah glance down the corridor at the workstation. The one Grace had built for him, way wider than our standard setups. Right by the natural sunlight, exactly the way he requested. "Because I need the room," he told him. Isaac studied the desk again with serious thought. "Or is it because you are more important?" Elijah let out this sudden quiet sound, completely off guard. It was the rusty laugh of a guy who hadn't chuckled in years and almost forgot how to do it. "Ask me later," he said, strolling down the hallway toward that oversized desk of his. The quiet kid matched his pace perfectly. And as we watched, the morning light through those luxury windows stretched across the floor in these straight, unhurried lines, like the quietest guys had finally decided to stay.